The men's basketball season kicks off Monday evening, and I'm going to tell you what I've got my eye on.
You are Locked On Illini, your daily podcast on the Illinois Fighting Illini. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome all to another edition of Locked On Illini. Thank you all so much for making us your first listen each and every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. My name is Sonny Verma, your host here at Locked On, where I continue to provide you coverage each and every day. Everything you see, everything you hear is absolutely free. If you want to support the program, the only thing I ask for in return is if you can smash that like button and make sure you are subscribed to the channel. It is my goal to get to 4,000 subs. Hopefully, maybe by the end of November. Who knows? We'll see. Today, we get to kick off basketball season. On Monday evening, Illinois is going to open up their season against Jackson State. And, well, if we're being honest, this shouldn't be much of a challenge on the basketball court. And if it is, then we have some serious problems. I just kind of want to discuss what I'm going to be looking for specifically on the Illini side. Normally, when these game previews, like I do on the football side, maybe I'll kind of focus on an individual player on the opposite team, what I want to see and what the keys to the game are. Again, I kind of feel like Illinois should win this game comfortably, and so I feel like I don't want to waste your guys' time with that, and instead take a view of what I'm looking for in a big picture sense when it comes to this basketball game. And first and foremost, let's just start with the elephant in the room, and that's injuries. What I want to know, or what I'm very interested in observing, is going to see who is playing. We know Mihailo Petrovic is out. I did a rapid reaction as soon as that was announced, I believe, on Friday afternoon. Brad Underwood on Sunday met with the media, and he said that apparently Mihailo, who had that nagging hamstring injury, well, he re-aggravated it in that scrimmage against the Florida Gators. And you never like to hear that. My hope was that maybe he had originally gotten that hamstring injury and they were just trying to play it safe, and that's why he didn't play many minutes against Florida. But it turns out, looks like he just re-aggravated it and he hurt it further. So what does that mean for the future? We don't know. Brad Underwood, of course, has no obligation to tell us. So if Mihailo Petrovic is out, they also announced that Andrej Stojaković is a game time decision. So we don't know if he's going to play. We're probably going to find out, sometime near tip-off. But if Andrej Stojaković and Mihailo Petrovic are not playing, that combined with the guy Ty Rodgers, we already know that are not playing. Now, you're looking at a pretty depleted roster to begin with. And that's going to be, again, it shouldn't be a tough task for Illinois. But again, you're going to be counting a lot on shortening your rotation, maybe, unless you're going to use this game to give a guy like Brandon Lee, Jake Davis, maybe even Jason Jackstis extended minutes just to see what they have and just to, give them a little run on the court. But that's the first thing I want to see. Who's playing? And with Stojaković coming back, we know he's been on a long-term injury at this point. At least it's been over a couple months. How rusty does he look? This game doesn't matter as much. Of course, you just want to take the W and you want to go home healthy. But in just a week and a half, Illinois is going to be facing off against Texas Tech. And against Texas Tech, you're going to need a healthy Mihailo Petrovic. Against Texas Tech, you're going to need a healthy Andrej Stojaković. You can't feel very confident that they're going to look great on the basketball court, but you want them playing at the very least. So we'll see what happens Monday evening to see who's going to play. Speaking of who's going to play point guard? With Mihailo Petrovic now officially out for Monday evening, the biggest lingering question I still have, and myself and Greg Waddell from the Sleepers Media Show, we talked about this in the season preview episode, which I released on Sunday. If you haven't watched that, please do so after this one. Well, we've heard recent rumblings that Keaton Wagler is going to be the running point guard on this basketball team, which surely surprises me a little bit because you have a guy there, Kylan Boswell, who has played point guard for the majority of his college basketball career. Now, Keaton looked, I think, okay in that exhibition match against Illinois State. And I've said all offseason long that Kylan Boswell, my hope before they had brought Petrovic in, was that they would find a more natural point guard, because Kylan, I thought, really did play better last year when Kasparis was the main one. And now with Petrovic out, it looks like it's going to be either Keaton or it's going to be either Kylan. So we're going to kind of get our first glimpse of who Brad Underwood and the coaching staff is going to entrust with the playmaking duties. Now, I don't think it's a huge deal because of the way this offense is structured. You have Tomislav Ivica, who the offense can absolutely run through. You're getting glimpses that the offense could run through a guy like David Mirkovic as well. I mean, that's something to kind of keep an eye on. If you throw it to one of them in the high post, you can run an offense around them because at least we know the case with Tomislav Ivica. He more often than not makes the right play. He's a really high IQ basketball player. And everything I've heard about David Mirkovic is very similar, that he can also be the engine that keeps everything running. So not having a natural point guard isn't a huge concern for mine, certainly not against Jackson State. But it still would be nice to get some answers because, again, we don't know the extent of this injury for Petrovic. We don't know if it's a simple matter of them being safe and that he'll be fine to go on Friday evening, or if this is going to be something that he's going to miss Monday, he's going to miss Friday evening, he's going to miss Texas Tech, and this is going to be a long-term concern. And if it is, well, then a backcourt that I don't think was very deep to begin with, especially without Ty Rodgers, well, that's going to be affected even more. And again, you're going to throw a guy like Brandon Lee into the fire and see if he is ready. Whereas before this Petrovic injury, my thinking was Brandon Lee would get sporadic minutes this year and just kind of be a developmental guy to learn from a guy like Kylan Boswell, who seems like the perfect mentor for him. But next man up. This is college basketball now. Things are serious. Brad Underwood has high aspirations for this basketball team. It's going to be really interesting to me to see who brings the ball up the court and who's handling the rock for the most part. And lastly, the other thing I'm really interested in watching is the Cameron Crocker defense. What is this defense going to look like? We know, and it's been the headache of Illini fans over the past couple of years, that the defense has simply not performed as well as the offense over the last few years. And Brad Underwood has recognized it. And it seems like that whole office has recognized it. Even Zach Hammer, the guy who was in charge of the defense the last couple of years, he admitted that things were getting stale. And Brad and the rest of the staff realized that they maybe kind of just needed an outside vision on the defense. In comes Cameron Crocker. Now, how he does, we'll see. Apparently, they're going to, not play as much drop coverage. Thank God, I hope so. But also be a little bit more aggressive in trying to get turnovers. That was certainly one of the weaknesses of last year's basketball team. They weren't very aggressive in trying to get steals, blocks. It was simply letting the opposition try to make mistakes, even though you couldn't necessarily be aggressive in trying to capitalize on that. I like the fact that with Cameron, I think, you don't have a very athletic team to begin with, but that's one thing certainly I'm going to keep an eye on. I want to see what kind of defense, or if it looks different against Jackson State. Let's be honest, I don't know if we're going to see much, both offensively or defensively. Why let your playbook out to a team like Texas Tech too early when you should be able to beat Jackson State just by running the ball onto the court and just playing regular basketball? But still, maybe we're going to get some glimpses. Let me know what you're looking forward to in this matchup and tell me how excited you are. You want score predictions? Let's hear some score predictions. I want to hear it in the comment section. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel more like a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices with no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. The app makes it super simple. I could even see the exact view from my seat before I wanted to buy. Honestly, it's just faster, it's cheaper, and it's a lot less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, Use promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Game Time today. And welcome back. Another thing I'm very curious about, and I want to get your input on this. This roster, 50% of it is pretty much brand new. Who do you think is the most important Illini on this basketball team? And it's for different reasons. I'll give you a name and I'll give you my thoughts on him. And maybe I'll give you my ultimate answer at the end, which, by the way, as I'm speaking, I don't know who I'm going to eventually name, but I'm very curious on your guys' thoughts. I think naturally you think of a guy like Tommy Ivisic. Tommy's got the highest floor on the team. I think it's easy to say that. In my opinion, he's the best center in the Big Ten Conference. He absolutely has the chance to be an All-American at the center spot. You saw how important he was last year when he was out dealing with that the illness. You can see that the offensive just looked a lot different without him. He's the quarterback of the defense and the offense. You can run through the offense through him, and you can see just how valuable he is. And he's kind of taken on, him and Kylan, a captain type of role this year. And so I think a lot of the success of this basketball team is going to be riding on Tomislav's shoulders. I think he's widely considered the best player on this Illini team. Does that mean the most important? I'm curious on your guys' thoughts. The other guy I think it's easy to say is Kylan Boswell, just because of kind of the same reasons I said about Tomislav. Kylan averaged 17 points per game at the end of the year last year, and you can really see his confidence level up as the season progressed last year and all off season long. If there's anything I've noticed is he really does seem like he's locked in. He's clearly our best defensive player, but I also think that he's found a role in the offense that he can really succeed in. And he takes this final year in Champaign, the hometown kid, very seriously. And I do think that this is just going to be something that I've got my eye on him, right? He's another guy, even though the Big Ten Conference is absolutely loaded with quality guards, he's a guy, if he has the year that some of us think that he's capable of having, he can be in the conversation for all Big Ten himself. I think Tomislav and Kylan Boswell are going to be the two pillars of this basketball team and who you're going to be counting on in order to win the Big Ten Conference. Other guys is, what about Andrej Stojaković, who I think was a crown jewel of this offseason, the guy that we went all out for. We pulled out all the stops. It was between the University of Illinois and the University of North Carolina. And luckily, we're very fortunate that Andres decided to reconnect with Orlando Antigua, who had recruited him in previous destinations, and come to Champaign. At one point, I thought he could be the highest scorer on this basketball team, and he very well could be. He averaged 17.9 points per game for Cal last year. This year, it's going to be a little bit different. His role has obviously changed a little bit, but I talked about it on last week's episode. He's the enigma for me. I don't know if he's going to be a very good role player on this basketball team or if he is the star on this basketball team. It could go either way. Brad Underwood all off season long has been talking about how Stojaković has been one of the better defenders on this basketball team, and that's what they're going to have him focus on. If that's the case, sure, we need some defense. Of course, this Illinois team hasn't exactly been known for their defense the last couple of years. So having a talented wing out there locking down on defense, that'll, of course, be accepted by the Illini fan base. But there's still a part of me saying he averaged 18 points per game in the ACC last year. He obviously has a very pro-level lineage, and so maybe he has that in him to carry this team even further. Another guy who I think is probably the most popular answer right now is David Mirkovic. David was just a showstopper in that opening exhibition match against Illinois State, but also in the secret scrimmage against the Florida Gators, who, by the way, are the national champions and returning that elite offensive, the front line that they have, which, again, helped them win the national championship last year. From everything we've heard, David performed equally as well against Florida as he did against Illinois State. Now, David is a kid who I had my eyes on. I remember in the FIBA, I was under 18s when we were all scouting Dami Sarr at the time. And David and Dami Sarr were on the same basketball team. And so David was just kind of like a secondary target of mine just to see how well he was playing. And I think he really jumped out at you. He looked like he was the best player, or at least one of the best players, and certainly in that first half of that basketball game. And then everything I've heard in the offseason since was that David was the most pleasant surprise in these off-season workouts. And you kind of saw it come to fruition against Illinois State and Florida. Does that continue on into the season? Now, if he performs well against Jackson State, it's not going to get me too excited. Obviously, the matchups against the Texas Techs and the Alabamas, those are going to matter much, much more. But certainly a guy who I think is you have to keep an eye on, because if David is your star, or if, maybe even Andrej Stojaković, if they reach a level that is unexpected, well, then you're talking about a team that's not just contending for the Big Ten championship. You're talking about a team that all of a sudden is a Elite Eight, Final Four type of contender. I think Kylan Boswell and I think Tomislav Ivisic are your keys to win the Big Ten Conference, which, of course, is not going to be easy because you've got that juggernaut out east from us, the Purdue Boilermakers returning to the best players in college basketball. That's a loaded roster, and all the pressure is on them. But Tomislav and Kylan can keep you in contention, and that's what you kind of want to count on from your two captains. But I think it's David Mirković, and maybe in a lesser extent, Andrej Stojaković as kind of the possible, the firecrackers, the guy who can all of a sudden elevate you to a different level and to compete not just for Big Ten championships, but maybe a national championship. And the last guy I'm going to talk about as being the most important is, again, a guy who I mentioned a lot on the show, in particular in that season preview, and that's Mihailo Petrovic, mainly because he's really the only natural point guard on this basketball team. And his skill set is unique to everyone else's on this basketball team. The kind of point guard he is a pass-first guy. He puts his head down and he jets. And again, the best way for me to describe it, and I've done this on the show before, is just imagine the 6'1" Terrence Shannon Jr., a guy who just loves to attack the rim. He keeps the defense on their heels, and I think he's going to continue to do that, especially like this Illinois team it's not an attacking style offense, right? It's just kind of pass the ball around and let's see who can get the open three-point shot, or I think they call it the gold shots. Well, Mihailo's just a little change of pace from that. He's a guy who's going to just keep the people running and keep as I mentioned, the defense on its back foot, and just putting constant pressure on them. And so I think he has to be mentioned as one of the most important players, because if he performs the way he does here in the States, like he did in his previous stop, the Adriatic League, where he was in the conversation for the MVP of that league. And again, that's not just a league full of plumbers and whatnot. Like, that's a legitimate league, one of maybe the 5-6 best in Europe. It's a very solid basketball league, and Mihailo Petrovic was one of the best players in that league. If he can translate that over to here and maybe be a guy who averages 11 points, 6 rebounds, 6 assists, then you have a guy who can kind of orchestrate this offense. And then maybe by the end of the year, you can slide Keaton Wagler over to the bench and let Kylan Boswell take over what I think is his more natural role as the 2 in this offense. And I just think, he's another guy you just kind of have to keep an eye on. Is there any other 5 guys that you would mention in the top 5 most important basketball players? I'm curious on your thoughts who you think is. For me, again, as I phrased it before, if you're talking about baseline, it's got to be Tomislav, and then maybe Kylan Boswell as a very close second. If anything were to happen to them, and I'm talking about injury-wise, the season could be in serious trouble. You're going to need those 2 guys to be contributors in really big ways. And quite honestly, I have a big level of confidence that those guys are going to be able to do just that they're not going to falter under the pressure or whatnot. But again, if your aspirations are to go beyond competing for the Big Ten, to go to the Sweet 16, to maybe even beyond that, then all of a sudden, I think, a guy like David might be the answer here, because I don't know if this team has a superstar on it. And if this team does not have a superstar, it's hard in this sport in today's day and age to move on in a 1-game series in March. So if you're talking about David making that leap, or again, maybe it's Andrej Stojaković making that leap, then you have that superstar. And then all of a sudden they become the most important player on your basketball team. Did I give an answer? I don't even think I did. I think my default answer has to be the most important player has to be Tomislav Ivisic. But I trust Tomislav Ivičić, and I think Tomislav is clearly the safest answer. But that's not necessarily maybe with the angle that you want to go. You might have higher hopes than I do. And if you do have higher hopes, then maybe a guy like David is your answer. Please let me know what you guys think. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets from everything about who's going to score next to maybe any fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps the game exciting, especially when it's your team making the late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Illinois football is coming off a very dominating victory, something that we all exactly we needed. Let's just be honest. It was 35-13 over the Rutgers on Saturday. It was a game which was in hand very early in that game. It started off with Luke Altmaier with a 99-yard drive on the first time that we had the ball. It was 35-6 in the fourth quarter. Rutgers gained, I think, like 150 yards passing just in junk time when the game was in hand. It was just an overall dominating performance. I have not been able to receive the all 22s yet, so I can't quite do my team grades yet. But I appreciate each and every one of you that joined me in the Rapid Reaction live post game immediately afterwards, where, I just talked about how this was not just what this team needed, but we had some back and forth with, whether this team has or is or can exceed expectations on the season. And, I understand big picture wise, that's where you're kind of looking at. But again, I'm going to use the same verbiage. Big picture wise, just let's settle in on where we're at now. At 6-3, Illinois has established themselves. They're going to go to another bowl game finally. And then Brad Sturdy, I think, brought up some stats, which I just wanted to air on the show because again, we have a lot of newer fans, especially on this platform on YouTube. They tend to skew a little younger. And so if you're a younger Illini fan who maybe just started watching when Brett Bielema took over, and you see what's happening in Bloomington and you see what's happening all over college football, you think, hey, Illinois, why can't they be, college football playoff bound or a top 10 team immediately right away too? And, I just try to tell a story respectfully from a long-term view, like some of us absolutely are. And so I want to give a little perspective using Brad Sturdy's terms, not mine, about where we're at with this victory on Saturday. And I'm just going to go beat by beat. Number one, Illinois is postseason eligible in back-to-back seasons for the first time since 2010-2011. That's 15 years. That's the first time that Illinois is going to be going to bowl games back-to-back seasons. Next beat. Illinois has 16 wins over the last two seasons. Its most wins over a 2-year period since 1989-90, when the Illini tied the program record for wins in a 2-year period with 18 under John Makovich. This team is still capable of winning 9 games this year. Even 8 games this year would be a successful season. When you talk about the long-term history of this college football program, we're in unprecedented times. Next one. Illinois has 21 Big Ten wins in Brett Bielema's first 5 seasons at Illinois. It is Illinois' most Big Ten wins in a 5-year period since winning 23 Big Ten games from 1990 to 1994. Again, if you just started being a fan when Brett Bielema took over, I just understand how incredibly spoiled you are. There were some very dark times for us who've been watching Illinois football for a couple of decades. And, this is why it takes a lot for me to say anything bad towards Brett. I do think he is the right guy, and I think he has the vision to eventually turn this program into a very good one. I think he's already turned us from, bottom of the barrel to above average at this point. But again, it's going to take some time. And finally, Illinois has 29 wins over the last 4 seasons. Its most wins over a 4-year period since winning 30 games from 1988 to 1991. I mean, all these stats that I'm talking about, you're talking about 30-year spans, 40-year spans. We're in a run right now that hasn't been seen in a very, very long time. And it just appreciate the moment. I understand we had some of us wanting to go to college football playoff. Of course, I wanted it too. But as I used this wordage on the live post game, I feel like that was hopeful. That was your dream. If that was your expectations, I question whether you had the right expectation on this football team. FanDuel had the over-under at 8.5 for the Illini. Other books had it, I believe, at 7.5. Most books had it at 7.5. So that's what the analytics. And look, I talked about this last week too. The AP had us ranked number 12 in the preseason ranking, and we got as high as number 9. And I know some of you and even I, we ate all that up. But when it came to the folks that were crunching the numbers, the analytics, I believe it was Kelly Ford, amongst others. Even when Illinois was ranked number 12, or when they were ranked number 9, Illinois, the numbers was showing that they were closer to ranked as the 30th best team in football. And if we're being honest, from what we've seen through these 9 games, we're probably closer to the 30th best team than we are the 9th best team. Now, that I don't mean that in a negative way. Most of our career, we've been close to the 90th best football team. That's adding an extra 0 at the end. So the fact that we're so close to, I think we're a top 30 team in the country, that is moving on up. The trajectory continues to move on up for this Illinois football program under Brett Bielema. It just may not be the rocket ship that we're seeing happen over in Bloomington. But that's never happened before, and it may never be done again. There's a very popular saying, and I think it's very fitting for this. Do not let perfect be the enemy of the very good. Right now, us Illini fans, we have it very, very good. And let's just appreciate the process, because I truly do believe that Brett Bielema one day can get us to that level of being a top 15, a top 10 team, legitimately competing for a college football playoff. And then once we're there, we'll all have appreciated this journey. We'll all have appreciated the ups and downs. It may not happen next year. Next year is clearly a rebuilding year, but who knows? It could happen 3 years from now, 2 years from now. We never know in the world of college football, college basketball, and just the transfer portal, NIL. No longer do you have to wait years upon years just to rebuild a football team. What you need is the right guy in charge. And I truly do believe that Illinois has that guy. That's going to be just about it for today. Again, if you haven't already, make sure you join the Talk Illini Discord. The link should be in the description. It's 300 of us talking Illini sports, professional sports. Oh my gosh, that World Series game on Saturday evening. We were talking about that. It's the closest way for you to involve yourself in the Illini community. Also, by the way, the Alabama game, I'm still working on securing a venue for a pregame. So if you're going to be making it to the United Center, just stay tuned to this channel, and I'll kind of let you know where we're going to meet up, maybe before the game, or maybe we'll meet up at halftime at a certain section of the United Center. Thank you for making Locked On Illini your first listen today. For your second listen, check out Locked On Big Ten. Craig Shimon breaks down the most exciting conference in college sports, from the rivalries to the championship and every game in between. Find Locked On Big Ten on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. That's it for now. Again, we're going to have a lot of basketball content for you. Football may be on bye week, but that does not mean we're going to stop talking football. So if you love Illini sports, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And until next time, ILL, love you guys.